I am Games, and these are opinions. Doom Eternal is a fucking roller coaster of a video game. And I don't just mean the highly cathartic, crazy, over-the-top, non-stop adrenaline rush fucking dicking of action the game gives you. I'm talking about my experience as a player. It was a series of peaks and valleys that started with valleys. I've completed the game as of a couple days ago, gave myself a few days to kind of sit on my thoughts on the game, and actually went back and replayed a bit of Doom 2016 to better compare the two, since there seems to be a bit of a contention, and I was on both sides of the fences as I went through my playthrough of whether Doom Eternal is a better game than 2016 and or a worthy follow-up. And TLDR, it's fucking incredible, it's great, it's amazing, it's definitely a worthwhile sequel, but I understand why some people are hesitant to adopt the changes that Eternal brings to the Doom 2016 formula, because when I started, I was one of those people. And it took a little bit of overcoming the growing pains of going from the mechanics and the gameplay flow of 2016 into Eternal. Doom Eternal is not just more Doom 2016. Doom Eternal is an evolution of a game that was already an evolution of the games that came before it. I still contend, even on the other side, coming around to Doom Eternal, that the beginning is not great. One of the most annoying things to me about Doom 2016 was the incredibly low ammo capacity you're given in the beginning of the game, especially compared to the starting ammo capacities in the original Doom. The bullet count is a lot lower. Like, you only have like 20 shots for your shotgun in the beginning and things like that, and you can burn through that very quickly. Now, the reason for this, assumedly, is because A, they want to give some ammo capacity upgrades to have that skill tree being able to be expanded upon in the game itself with the use of the Argent Energy, but also because they have the chainsaw, and the way the chainsaw works in 2016 is that you can hack people up and get ammo from them. So it's a way of incentivizing using this chainsaw, which you get very early into the game. By the end, you can have, I think, 60 shotgun shells by putting upgrades into your ammo capacity as you go through the game, if you choose to prioritize that particular part of the skill tree, which I did. Doom Eternal works much differently. You start with an even lower ammo capacity than in Doom 2016, and even maxing out the skill tree for ammo capacity gives you very little additional ammunition. By the end of the entire playthrough, I only had 24 shots for a shotgun, going up from I think the initial 18 or 16, something in that vein. You only get like 2 more slugs per upgrade point. And if you're using the super shotgun, which everybody should be by the end of the game, you're using 2 shots. So you really can only have 12 shots with the super shotgun. And it doesn't have the upgrade that Doom 2016 did. By mastering it, you can shoot twice and expend only 1 shell per shot. That is not here in Doom Eternal, because Doom Eternal's flow is a lot different, and it took me a while to figure this out, because there's another significant change that Doom Eternal makes to 2016's gameplay, in that the chainsaw constantly is refilling and always has at least 1 charge that refills over time. So it expects you to continually be chainsawing through small enemies like zombie soldiers and imps to replenish your ammo in the middle of the fight. This keeps the flow of combat pretty hectic, because you're constantly disengaging from what you're currently doing to hack into some small guy, and the throw of this is pretty far. You can hit someone from, halfway across the room and enter into the chainsaw kill animation, reclaim ammo, and keep going. It also expects you to shift between your entire arsenal. It's easy by the halfway point of 2016 to settle into 1 or 2 favorites, because the ammo capacity can potentially be so large, and most weapons are effective against all enemies. But Doom Eternal has weak points and sweet spots on all of the enemies, and certain enemies are easily killed with certain weapons. So it kind of expects you to use its entire arsenal, and has crafted its enemies and its gameplay design to incentivize using all the tools at your disposal. And you have to use all your tools at your disposal. You have to use the flame belch, you have to use the blood punch, you have to use the chainsaw constantly, and you have to use all of your weapons, because the game fucking annihilates you if you don't respect its paradigm it's putting forth in front of you. It's giving you a plethora of options. Doom 2016 had guns, grenades, the chainsaw, and the BFG. Doom Eternal has all of those, plus a dash, plus much more aerial grappling, plus the flame belch, plus the sword. All of these things are essential to be constantly cycling through in combat. And because your ammo capacity in the beginning is so limited, and also because me personally, I didn't realize that the chainsaw refilled over time, so I was holding off on using it because fuel is not placed as frequently as it was in 2016, I was getting my ass rocked. This made the first couple hours of Doom Eternal very painful. I died more on the 3rd level of Doom Eternal than I did in all of my playthroughs of 2016 combined. And this is mostly my fault for not fully understanding the mechanics that Doom Eternal is bringing to bear, but also because this game is much more difficult. The pace is much higher. Doom Eternal throws so much shit at you that in the beginning, before I got accustomed to the flow and how everything worked, it felt like its first-person perspective was a detriment. This seemed to me like a game that if it was being developed as a new IP and not as a sequel to Doom, it probably would have at some point in development shifted to a third-person perspective simply because situational awareness is so fucking key in this game because there are dozens of enemies flanking you constantly, which demands you be on the move even more so than 2016, because you have dashing that you basically need to be spamming consistently in order to outflank enemies, get out of the line of fire, and move across these larger, more spacious arenas that have much more multi-layered vertical movement to them because you have a lot more jumping abilities and eventually the meat hook with the super shotgun, which gives you lots and lots of mobility. So it's a very overwhelming game in the beginning, almost to its detriment. There were a lot of people in the first couple days of Doom Eternal who thought it was a shittier game than 2016 because it was just such a different feeling. It's not a game that being accustomed to the previous game gives you an edge going into this one. It really ups the ante as much from Doom 2016 as Doom 2016 did from the typical AAA shooters coming out at the time. It's that much of a, I guess for lack of a better term, generational leap in terms of complexity and in terms of intensity. This game fires on all cylinders constantly. And while I would constantly find myself out of breath my first kind of run through of Doom 2016, in this game I would feel physically exhausted at the end of some of these encounters simply because they were demanding so much of me in the beginning when I had a very limited arsenal, very tiny health pools, and a very complicated set of controls that you need to keep in mind and juggle because all of those controls are essential to getting anywhere in the game. I was playing this on PC with a mouse and keyboard, and it requires a fair bit of hand gymnastics to get your mind wrapped around all of the controls. This is a game that requires the precision of a mouse with all the intensity and the specific aiming for sweet spots on the enemies, but it also demands the comfort and ergonomics of a gamepad for all of the different abilities it gives you. And so it kind of feels like it's at war with itself. It's like I would want to have a mouse in one hand and half of a gamepad in the other hand to give me the optimal way of playing this game. Now, I have 20 hours in the game now. I've beat the game. I've played a couple of the levels over again just for fun, going into the Ripitorium and stuff. I haven't tackled any of the master levels yet. But now, going back and playing it again, with the understanding of how these mechanics work and being more comfortable with the controls and realizing that the chainsaw is something you're supposed to be spamming constantly, the flow works so incredibly well. This feels like Devil May Cry in first person sometimes, with the finesse that you can command on the battlefield once you have a comfortable understanding of how these mechanics work. Being able to double jump, double dash in the air, and then meat hook somebody to keep your momentum going pretty much across an entire massive cavern, and then right as you're about to hit the enemy, unload a super shotgun, reduce him to gibs, turn around, hit the ground, immediately double dash again to move closer to somebody, blood punch them, turn them into gibs, and then as someone else is coming up to you, fire another super shotgun shot, and it just never stops. You can chain entire encounters into a single unending flow of absolute death and carnage once you are fully competent in using all the skills Eternal presents you. However, getting there takes a bit of doing. It felt, and I hate to compare this to the game that's always being compared to, but it felt a lot like my first experience with Bloodborne or Dark Souls, a Souls-like game, where it presents a very specific style of play it expects of you, and it takes a little bit of time to understand the flow in order to accommodate it and meet it on its own terms and be able to play it effectively. It requires you to adapt to it, as opposed to it adapting to you. Not to say that the game doesn't have a lot of options, but there is a very specific syncopation in the moment-to-moment gameplay that Doom Eternal requires you adopt to a certain degree in order to become proficient at. And I suppose all games do this to a certain degree, but it's much narrower and much more frenetic and much more specific than the more open-ended options of Doom 2016. Now, this gameplay flow works incredibly well in the general normal encounters when it's you, Doom Guy, versus an army of fucking guys, and you're just zooming around the battlefield, popping off shots when you can, choosing your targets, throwing grenades to kind of crowd control while taking super shotgun shots at certain guys, toggling out to like the plasma rifle or the Gatling gun and laying down suppressing fire on guys, and it's just an army of guys versus you. This works incredibly well. But when the game is throwing a specific big meaty target at you, like a boss, and expects you to focus all of your attention on this one guy, the gameplay starts to fall apart. Because you have a limited arsenal. You have a limited pool of ammunition. This is by design. It wants you to be running around the battlefield chainsawing every 1 to 2 minutes to repull your ammo. But in a boss fight, you're not running around a room versing like 50 guys at once. You're trying to focus on a single target, and this single target requires a lot of your attention, but you don't have enough ammo to finish the encounter, so you have to continually disengage from the boss and attack and chainsaw the mobs that are constantly spawning throughout the encounter, basically to give you ammo. But the problem is, of course, you're trying to focus on a boss fight, and you can't. But also, you're constantly being flanked by fucking mobs, because they're running around the battlefield, giving you the option to refill your ammo when you need it. So it kind of feels like there's an underlying level of constant distraction when you'd much rather focus on this one-on-one epic encounter. And it's kind of undermined by the mechanics that work so well in the general encounters, because it doesn't translate very well to this scenario. Combined with the fact that there are moments in Doom, especially in the beginning, where it just feels like it's dialing it up to 12, where 11 would have been sufficient. The first main quote-unquote boss encounter, this boss quickly becomes a common enemy, is the Doom Hunter. And the Doom Hunter, again, this is before I really got comfortable with the game, so playing it now probably wouldn't be as bad. But from the perspective of a new player still trying to come to grasps with the mechanics and the expectations of the flow of this game, it throws this boss at you, the Doom Hunter. And I was struggling to hold my own against this guy during my playthrough. And I was whittling away at his life bar only to realize, oh fuck, he has 3 life bars. So I was already exhausted from this first life bar, not realizing there were 3 of them. And then once I killed him, I went through a portal, now I have to fight 2 of them, both with 3 life bars. And it's just like, one would have been enough. One would have been enough. Didn't have to go ham with 3 bosses essentially back to back, especially during the beginning of the game where you're not fully spec'd out. Because you don't start with a lot of ammo, or a lot of life, or a lot of armor. And enemies do normally like 30 to 50 damage a hit, and you start with 100 HP. So you stop moving for like 10 seconds, anything in the game can kill you pretty quickly. So you're basically constantly running around glory killing and chainsawing just to stay in the fray, and all of this constant having to disengage from the main target in a boss encounter to go farm health and ammo from the mobs, it feels shitty because you want to have this one-on-one encounter. You want to focus on the boss, but you can't focus on the boss because the mechanics that help increase the frenetic nature of a room full of normal enemies is now hamstringing your attempts at having an encounter with this boss. So the 2 actual like real bosses in the game, the Khan Maker and the Icon of Sin, are the 2, in my opinion, lowest points of the game. The Khan Maker eventually, once I started figuring out how it worked, was probably the better of the 2 fights because it didn't last nearly as long. The frustration in the Khan Maker for me personally was finding an effective strategy to beat it because it's a lot. It's like an aerial target. You have to shoot it from afar, but it's constantly making like half the arena you're in on fire. And there's tons of ads running around, and the ads in this aren't just like little zombie soldiers and imps. They're the drones of the Khan Maker, and they're much more powerful, so they can do a significant amount of damage, and there's like 3 or 4 of them at once. So this is a difficult encounter, but once you get a hang of it, you can do it pretty quickly. The Icon of Sin is much longer because you have to target 8 individual body parts twice, and there's a multi-stage arena in both of these parts of the encounter. There's tons of enemies. It's cool because it's just throwing, respawning ammo and stuff at you, so you're constantly firing off the BFG and using the Crucible Blade because there's just infinite pickups for it. But it's just like, that boss fight wasn't as difficult, it was just a lot more monotonous, because again, it's the same problems I was discussing with any boss encounter, but it was just extended for a much longer period of time. So both of these like really high moment points of the game kind of lacked a bit in terms of gelling with the general flow of the game. The other notable thing about this game, and one of the places where I think it might be a little bit weaker than 2016, is the narrative and the presentation. So Doom 2016 had this really interesting aspect where Doom Guy is this irreverent, angry dude. He doesn't give a fuck about what's going on in the story. There's a story happening around you with Samuel Hayden in the UAC and the invasion of Mars. Doom Guy could not give less of a single solitary fuck about any of this shit that's happening. The first thing he does in the game is, in no unclear terms, throw away the narrative, clearly implying that the story is not going to be the central focus of this experience. It's this kind of like irreverence that was really cool. Doom Guy did a lot of emoting this way. Like when you got an upgrade bot, you would take the upgrade from it and then punch it in the face, which is a really funny thing. There were just a lot of little subtle things like that. A lot of subtle environmental and non-verbal storytelling and character development on the account of Doom Guy. Like right before it cuts to the main title of Doom 2016, Hayden's telling you how like, oh, we did this for all the right reasons, our heart was in the right place. And like as he's saying that over the radio, Doom Guy looks down and there's a dead body just mutilated in the elevator he's in. So it's just like little things like that. Doom Eternal feels like it's the third game in a series where the second game has been completely cut out, because you enter Doom Eternal with hell invading Earth, and it just feels like it's not the place to pick up from in the last game, because Doom 2016 ends with Hayden getting the Crucible from you and then teleporting you back into hell. That's how the game ends. And so you would expect to pick up in hell and wanting to fucking kill Samuel Hayden. That was what I was looking forward to doing in Doom Eternal, was getting back at Samuel Hayden for dicking me over. He was kind of played up as the villain. Samuel Hayden plays almost no part in Doom Eternal. Samuel Hayden is in the game, but he's already basically destroyed and is just a comatose robotic corpse that you drag back to your Fortress of Doom, which is a whole other thing. Doom Eternal is much more interested in developing the character of the Doomslayer, and that's something that has some interesting moments. But on the whole, I kind of preferred the mystique of Doom Guy being just a dude too angry to die. We get a very detailed explanation of the Doom Guy's backstory, how he got to where he is, the whole culture of the Sentinels, and Doom Guy's place in there, and how he became the legendary Doomslayer from just Doom Guy, because this game does take place canonically after the original Doom and Doom 2. Those are all canon to the story. It's the same Doom Guy. It's not a reboot. So it's interesting, but I don't know if the characterization is worth the kind of irreverent charm that the too angry to die, mysterious Doom Guy from 2016 leaves. And the fact that we don't ever get a confrontation with Samuel Hayden, and it kind of leaves all the tension that was built up from the cliffhanger ending of Doom 2016 and jumps to this totally new conflict that feels largely disconnected from all the narrative stuff put forward in the previous game, is kind of strange. So, all that being said, I think mechanically, Doom Eternal is head and shoulders above Doom 2016. I went back and played a couple levels of Doom 2016. It's still a great game. It's a different kind of game, and it's a different kind of flow, but I really missed the meat hook. I missed the dashing. There were just elements that Doom Eternal brings to the table that I don't want to go back to not having. So mechanically, I feel Eternal is a huge step up. Narratively speaking, while there is more of a narrative, and the narrative takes itself a lot more seriously, I think that's a huge detriment. I think the smaller, subtler story of 2016 was not more engaging, but just more entertaining. Doom Guy just being angry, wanting to kill demons. We didn't know or need to know his motivations. He was just fucking pissed off, and just completely ignoring all of the actual happenings was much more entertaining to me than having Doom Guy himself and his backstory being like the linchpin of the entire narrative structure of the game. I think that's some interesting info, and it's interesting how it ties in all the other Doom stuff from Doom 1, Doom 2, and Doom 64 all the way to the Doom comic. Those are all canonized in this game. I just didn't care enough for Doom Guy as a character to really want to know his backstory. So overall, this game is like a fucking 9 out of 10 easily. I think if you can get over the first couple hours and come to grips with the mechanics, you're in for a fucking incredible ride, boss fights aside, but even those aren't enough to drag the experience down. I just don't think the narrative is nearly as endearing as 2016's. And of course, the best thing I can really say about Doom Eternal, especially in the greater landscape of video games right now, is that in an industry full of live services and engrossing, interactive cinematic experiences, Doom Eternal is unashamed and proudly proclaims it is a video game. It has big, gamey elements. It has a crazy, over-the-top HUD. It has extra lives that it doesn't bother trying to explain in any way, shape, or form. Doom Eternal knows it's a video game, embraces that it's a video game, and isn't trying to be anything more than that. It's just trying to be the best fucking video game it can be, and it's so much better because of that. Hey, thanks for making it to the end of this video. One of the things I didn't really get to talking about in terms of Doom Eternal that I really liked was the better sense of like catharsis in the raw game feel. Something that I thought was kind of lacking in Doom 2016 compared to Brutal Doom, which I played a lot of. I actually made a whole video about it on Iron Games, which I'll link in the cards, I suppose. This game improves a lot in that regard. While the sound effects still don't really hold a candle to Brutal Doom, in my opinion, the addition of dynamic damage to demons, like as they get hurt, big chunks of their flesh come ripping off, really helps solidify the sense of impact all your weapons have, even the weak ones like the combat shotgun and single shots from the heavy assault cannon. That all feels really fucking good, and it's a huge improvement over 2016 IMO, and probably one of the biggest reasons, along with the additional mobility, that I can't really go back to 2016 now that I've tasted a bit of Doom Eternal. If you like this video, I'm also making a game of my own you can check the demo out of over on Newgrounds. In addition, I'm also doing some low poly animation work, which you can check out on Twitter and Newgrounds as well. If you like these videos or that artwork, consider supporting me on Patreon. You donate $1 a month to get access to a bunch of extra bonus videos and random rants and ramblings about stuff like video games and new TV shows and stuff that comes out. And if you donate $5 a month, you get access to the bonus podcast that's just for patrons, where you get to decide what's talked about every week. That's all I got for now. Remember to always be the games you want to see. I Am Games, signing out.